so I've got a simple story to tell you, which actually began quite a few decades ago now, and not been told before. But it began on Christmas Eve, 1964, and had a telephone call from the Ministry of Public Buildings and Works, from an inspector of ancient monuments, a certain Stuart Rigold, a very ample gentleman, who was a brilliant Cambridge scholar, and worked at, where was he researched the spy station? Somewhere in Bletchley, that's it. Worked at Bletchley during the war, was a brilliant chap, and put him in the ancient mons section. And he phoned up on Christmas Eve, early in the morning, and said, we've got a bit of a problem. There's a place called Faversham, which had an abbey, which nobody knows where it was, and it's going to be developed for housing. And as it's a scheduled area, we're allowed 6 months to do something about it. Well, the trouble is we were notified 12 months ago and we forgot. And the 6 months has come and gone, and the developer can start straight away if she wants her. Mrs. King, does that ring a bell?
Yeah.
Mrs. King. Anyway, so I said, well, what's the problem? He said, well, we've got to do an excavation immediately. Oh yes, and they knew I'd been running a team in West Kent, another one in East Kent, and particularly at Reculver. I'd worked all the winters at Reculver, and you may realise that Christmas is midwinter, and said the problem is we've got to start on the 1st of January. That's a good day to start. At that time, all excavations, as Pat will probably know, were conducted in the summer, in the months of July and August, mostly by university students, always on some sunny hilltop, always near 2 pubs. And that was about the extent of it. And none of them wanted to be digging holes in January, and it's snowing and raining, dark at 4 o'clock. So rather than say yes straight away, I knew the ancient Mons people, they'd all be on Christmas leave for a fortnight. They wouldn't be anywhere near anything cold and snowy on January the 1st. And I said, right, phone you back in an hour. So I quickly looked up Victoria County histories and found out that Faversham Abbey was quite a major structure in its time. And on the monastic scale, you've got priories, and abbeys are at the top. And at that time, in the 12th century, Canterbury Cathedral was Christchurch Priory. Wasn't an abbey. Christchurch, St Augustine's was an abbey. The cathedral was a priory. And Rochester Cathedral was St Andrew's Priory. That wasn't an abbey either. So it began to give some idea of scale. Anyway, the next thing to look up is the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles. The last entry is 1154, and it says, and in this year King Stephen was buried at Faversham, where his wife and son were buried at Faversham, which monastery they founded. Now that's not bad. It's a monastic major building, abbey. It's a royal burial site. They were the monks of the Cluniac order, very lavish order, Reformed Benedictines, and you can imagine the church is going to reflect that opulence both inside and outside in structure. So it looked like a good bet. So I said, well, I'll take my teams in there on the 1st of January, providing you provide some finance. I'm going to have to use machines. This was unheard of virtually in those days, but we pioneered machine archaeology some years before, so we knew about it. And I got hold of Mrs. King, so we had a few days, and she was quite supportive, and she said you can use an empty house in Abbey Street as your base. I think it was 79, it was empty as a base, and there was an empty warehouse next to it where we could put all our vehicles and tools and equipment, so it sounded pretty good. And I was allowed to get 6 men from the labour exchange. Now, of course, you realise that that could be very expensive exercise, because the hourly rate was 30p. So what is it today? What's the minimum wage today?
£12.21.
There we are. There we are. How about that, from 30p?
Yeah.
And the digger was £1.50 an hour. Well, it's like £16 an hour now. Petrol, they gave petrol away then. So we said, yes, we'll do it. You've got to provide the finance. I'll get 4 men from the Labour Exchange, bring my teams in. We'll live in that, the lads can live in 79, and we'll start on January the 1st. Well, it didn't get light till about 7:45, and we never saw the sun at all. The sun failed to appear ever. So I thought, well, I better come down the day before. So I came down New Year's Eve and booked in at a pub just across the road, and it's still there, pub across the road. And I don't know why, but I was walking round the town at about midnight on New Year's Eve, and I walked past Woolworths. Is it still there?
No. The building is.
The building is.
Is it? Right. Well, I walked past Woolworths, and the light was on at the back. So I put my foot against the door and it opened. It was a bit funny. You know, what on earth's happening there? This place is being robbed. So I got back to the pub, phoned the police and said, there's something iffy going on in Woolworths, you better check up. So they went to bed. 3 o'clock in the morning, there's a hammering on the door. It's a publican. What the hell do you want? It's 3 o'clock. Oh, it's the police. They want to thank you. So they might have waited till breakfast. They want to thank you. So anyway, this is important. I obviously identified a potential crime on the first day of the dig. Remember that. Anyway, so we started on the 1st, and of course in what was called Well Orchard, and it was only a 2-week operation. That was the bit that was going to be developed, and it's covered in fruit trees and chickens. The chicken sheds there. So anyway, first job of course was knock out a few trees and chase the chickens off, and get stuck in the big trenches across the area, and proved that weather was chronic, and let the lads go in 79, and there's downstairs that we used as an office and restroom, and then upstairs they had their sleeping bags on the floor, and the back and the front room, and between them there was a wooden staircase boxed in that led to the attic with a door on it. So I thought, when I got there first, I thought, well, that attic's not been used for a long time. No, don't want anybody to go up there. So I got a 6-inch nail and a club hammer, and I put the 6-inch nail through the door into the post like that. No one could open that door, right? Nobody could open that door. So we carried on, and the digging went quite well in spite of the weather. And we started picking up the chalk foundations of early buildings. That was brilliant. And within the fortnight, we picked up the round chalk foundations of a large dormitory range, the Daughter, a chapter house running off it, a few burials, they're going to be the abbots, then the big northern range, which was the refectory, and then we got the west range, and that formed the cloister, and very large scale, matching St Augustine, terrific, and a good scattering of artefacts. So clearly we'd found the cloister of the lost Faversham Abbey, so we thought that was pretty good. Our friends in the Faversham News took it on, and that's what they produced. I've still got it. Right. So that seemed to go quite well, and we'd done in the fortnight. We'd done the work in spite of the weather. Looked good. Got the cloister. Mrs. King seemed quite happy, and the worthy Mr. Riggold turned up on the last day to see what we were doing, wrapped up in 2 overcoats. Remember, the weather was chronic. Big scarf around his neck, and walked from the station. Got a flask of whiskey with him, which he was swigging all the time, and he couldn't believe that we'd done so much. We'd moved, 800 tons of soil, loads of chickens and trees and things, and had got exactly what we were looking. And it was called Well Orchard, by the way, which is a small clue. We got the domestic buildings. Well, something's missing. The church. Right, and the churches are quite often on the south side of a major church, but in an urban setting they're quite often on the north side, away from the town, away from the noise and bustle of the town. So this being the case, and I noticed right in one corner an absolutely massive round chalk foundation sticking out from under the fence from next door, and that was another big orchard. So the old Riggold said, "Oh, this is brilliant, well, brilliant. He said, I wonder where the church is. I said, I think it's over the fence next door. And I said, you better wake up, because that's another orchard, and they're going to build Faversham Grammar School there in a fortnight. Because I met two KCC surveyors, and I said, what are you up to? And they said, we're just doing a final survey to ready for building Faversham Grammar School. And I said, when's that due? So it's all about Easter, but the contractor's coming in 2 months early. And his first job is to rip out all the trees and rip the ground to a depth of 2 feet to get all the roots out. I said to him, well, you better watch out, there's a church, there's a KCC, I said, there's an old church here. I didn't mention a monastic church. I think they got the idea it was about the size of this room. So said, you know, you better let us get in here first and before you destroy everything. So they didn't seem to disagree. I thought it might be time. So I said to Rickold, I think the church is in there and it's going to be destroyed. What are you going to do about it? Oh dear, that's a bit of a problem. So I said, I'll tell you what, here's a deal. I'll stay here for another 3 weeks. You'll put up the funds for it, and I'll put we're teams established here. We'll go into that next field, okay, and see if we can find a church. And I said, I need to know by 5 o'clock. So he said he beetled off to London, and the phone went about 4 o'clock. He said they've agreed. You know, it's a deal, and they've agreed. Which is pretty unlikely getting an answer from the civil service in a, you know, they'd obviously seen a bargain. Then what he was telling his mates. And so anyway, we had to get straight in. I got another machine in on the job. I had to take out a wall and zip into this new area, pluck out a load more trees and start trenching. And fairly soon we were picking up round chalk foundations of a great scale, and we'd obviously hit the nave of the church. It was vast, 4 lots of round chalk foundations, no masonry, and the width itself was 86 feet, which is on par with all the great cathedrals in the land. I've been and measured them all. 86 feet, north aisle, south aisle in the main nave, 28 feet, well, it's all imperial of course, and got the central tower. They have a massive central tower, terrific, you know, these great churches do. So there were a load of bushes on the at the west end there, cleared all those away, and there's a big stone boundary wall at the bottom of the gardens of those houses in Abbey Street. Cleared all that away, and looking more carefully, the bottom 3 feet of that wall was the part of the monastic church. It had been left. It was the west front. Not only that, if you look very carefully, the central west doorway was there, with cairnstone jambs each side, about 9 feet wide. That was the west front with a major doorway. And whoever left that in at the dissolution, they'd overbuilt the top to make that boundary wall, which is quite high, still there. And the thing had survived, so part of it did survive. So we were delighted. I ought to mention the foundation is, I think it's something like 1137, and the king had obviously selected Faversham as a key point for a royal mausoleum, and that's rather significant because no other royals are buried really elsewhere. Henry the Black Prince and Henry IV, I think, are in Canterbury. Quite a few are in Westminster, of course. Quite a few later in Windsor. William I's in Cornwall. William II's in Rufus is in Winchester. And Henry I is in Reading Abbey. So had in fact the king buried and had his line continued, Faversham would have contained the tombs of royal monarchs probably for another 200 or 300 years, possibly more. You know, this is the Windsor of the South even. So and the abbots here sat in Parliament for quite a number of occasions. You know, they were the top brass, and of course at the dissolution it took a hammering, not in the first bout, which were the lesser buildings, but in 1539 demolition very thorough, obviously very thorough. But some bits were left. The West Range was left, with generally the abbot's lodgings, which is quite common as somebody, and big landowners come and snap it up. And the records show that the townspeople, once the dissolution had been declared and they got rid of the abbot and the monks, the townspeople raided the church. And that's quite interesting. Anyway, then of course the whole lot sold off, the lead in the roof, or the masonry. There's 20,000 tonnes of masonry there at least. And that can all be sold off to subcontractors and the rest. The king's going to collect it, and then he's going to sell the land off to local landowners, which they did. So yeah, we were delighted, and the weather was still pretty severe. Anyway, one or two funny things started happening. The lads were sleeping in the number 79. They came down one morning. They said, "We've got a problem." I said, "What's that?" They said, "There was somebody on those stairs between the bedrooms." I said, "No, there was." I put a 6-inch nail through that door. There's nobody can get up in that attic. And I checked up, and it was still there. And they were convinced that they'd heard somebody climbing, walking up those stairs in the middle of the night. Well, that wasn't all. The back of the building was hugely overgrown, empty properties, big trees, and the wind used to howl through there, and the rain used to pour. And the loo was down. There was a little hut down the bottom of the garden. And
Of course.
yeah, probably still there. And of course the lads had to use that of an evening. I was sitting writing notes, of course, and they were very reluctant to go down there on their own. They were quite convinced that there was something a bit funny going on there, which of course there was. And yeah, so that got quite a funny spirit going. And one night there was one of the lads there, about 9 o'clock. I'm writing the notes and doing it. I said, "Where are your finds?" He said, "Oh, I left them in a tray down on the site." We'll go and get them. It's pitch black. It's snowing. He gets a torch and he goes down there. Frightens the life out of him because he's flashing his torch around and the trees are giving shadows and everything's moving. And he's absolutely convinced that something's down there, and he came back nearly white-haired. Didn't want to go again, so I said, "Oh, get on with it." So anyway, we finished the 3 weeks, got the nave, we got the transept, brilliant. And on the last day, the worthy Mr. Riggold turned up again, wrapped up in his 2 overcoats and scarf, and shivering, in his whisky flask, and said, "How's it getting on?" I said, "Well, we found the church. I mean, here's the nave, we've got the west front. And what's more, we climbed over the wall, and I spoke to the lady in that house, and I said, 'I think your cucumbers are growing on a bit of the church. Can we dig?' He said, 'Oh, it's all right.' So we, quick excavation, and found a porch. The west front had a nice porch on it, and the foundation was there, quite good. And the round chalk foundations actually went down into her gardens as well, which was interesting. And nearby we found a round tower, which had presumably been a spiral stair going up the side of the church, because the front of the church had 2 massive towers, which is common in the Westminster Abbey and all the big churches, 2 big to access for some reason. So I said, "Oh, we found the church." So he said, "Well, it's jolly good. Oh, I'm very pleased with that and delighted." And he said, "Have you found the king's tomb?" I said, "Well, no, it won't be in the nave. Well, it's going to be in the eastern arm, quite clearly, near the high altar." So he said, "Well, where's that?" I said, "It's obviously down there, further down the orchard." "Oh, right." I said, "Look, if you're interested in finding the rest of the church and the king's tomb, I'll get my team to stay here for another 3 weeks, and that's all. You'll have to fund it, and I need to know by 5 o'clock. He's shivering like anything. He disappears, and the phone rings about 4 o'clock. And I said, "Yes," it agreed again. Mainly because I think it's a huge bargain. You know, having a team of midwinter, none of them were going to do it, that's for sure. And so I said, "Okay, we go for the last 3 weeks." And I said, "I better warn you, at the end of 3 weeks, the contractor's coming in and he's destroying everything." Righto, that's the deal with the KCC. So he ummed and ahed a bit, but it couldn't use the scheduled monument powers. That had come and gone. That had expired. Today, of course, it's different. But that had expired. He'd given them 6 months' notice. You can do what you like. So I said, "Right, we'll stay." So I checked all the dimensions of big churches elsewhere, and there's a ratio between the nave and the choir arm. The choir arm's smaller. a ratio of probably 5 to 3 or something like that. So I said the first thing we'll do is put a trench right down the centre line of the church, and we'll pick up the east end. So got the team to work, cracking and work, and the machines. The weather was still pretty rotten, and put a trench down, and got to a point 250 feet from the west front. That's a hell of a distance. Couldn't find the east end. So right, carry on, banged on, got to 300 feet, still couldn't find the west end. So I said, well, it's obviously been destroyed. It's not there. So, yes, it is. We carried another 50 feet, 350 feet, still haven't got the east end. So carried on, another 15 feet, we got it. That church was 364 feet long. That's bigger than Canterbury was at the time, and bigger than St Andrews Rochester was at the time. Not since, they've only expanded. And it was one of the biggest churches in the realm, no doubt about it, in keeping with the royal foundation. And it had a very interesting, you can see on the plan, very interesting end. It had a 3-axed choir. Righto. Now they went out of fashion in the middle of the 12th century, and since the ends of big churches are usually apse ambulatory, and 3 bubble chapels like that, or sticking out at funny angles. But as Martin's Dover is like that, Martin's Priory. And yeah, we got this, hit the end, expanded, opened up a big area, filled up with snow, of course. And we had, before we could start in the mornings, had to shovel the snow away. Anyway, managed to find that we got a 3-axed, parallel apse choir end, which was probably the latest. Peterborough Abbey's got it. It's probably the latest of the period, and the fashion had changed after that. So we think there was an elderly architect on the job using old plans. All right, okay. Anyway, so we thought that's great. We better open up an area, and then we decided to open up the transepts, the big transepts on the crossing. And we got some chapels on those, 4 more chapels. We've got 7 chapels altogether. Fantastic. And what about the royal vaults? Oh, well, worked out where the high altar would have been, stripped an area nearby, and found 2 vast pits, great rectangular pits, about that wall to the window to about my hand, like this, 2 vast pits, and a pair of them in front of the high altar. And we partly excavated those, absolutely full of broken mortar. Whatever the church, when it was demolished, of course, they take all the masonry, but all the mortar in the joints falls away and leaves a scatter, and which is quite useful as a marker. And these 2 pits were absolutely full of crumbled mortar and bits and fragments, including some painted plaster, which are highly decorated, which is here. And clearly they'd been elaborate. And what had happened, those had been underground vaults with stone linings, and the royal burials had been placed, presumably in lead coffins, inside, sealed over, and a monumental tomb put on top, rather similar to the one at Westminster Abbey for one of the very last Saxon kings. Anyway, and I've got a drawing of one big, it's very important, there's one big lump of masonry that came out of there, which is in the published report, on the drawing there. It's a column base, and it's got a scallop decoration on it, and there were traces of gold and red paint on it. That was the corner, I was never the Confessor, that was the corner of a big monumental tomb, matching Edward the Confessor's at Westminster. And this is the general thing, as you know, you get a big rectangular tomb, and if you look at the black prints, and they're not lavishly decorated. And that should be here. Now you ought to check on that, because I gave all the finds here, and there was some doubt whether that was still here. Now that is it's about that size. It's in the report, and I've got the drawing. So that is very important. Do check to see if that's still here. And of course, during the process of all this work, lots of architectural fragments and other things which were brilliant. Anyway, what we suddenly noticed that these ram chalk foundations, masonry had gone, were cut by a number of graves, all east-west graves. I think we've got about 80 altogether, and it's part of the monastic cemetery. Well, what are graves doing cutting through the foundations? That doesn't make any sense. And upon checking and looking at the archaeology stratigraphy, we realised that this great church had 1137, by about 1210 was not quite finished. And this is typical of all big churches. It takes 60 or 80 years to build them. You know, they're vast structures, got to raise the money. And we reached about 1210. The king had come and gone, of course, and his line had expired, big changes. And this, note, the resources that were given to the church for building had tailed off. And the architect and the abbot of the day had said, we're stuck, the church isn't quite finished. The resources are out, what do we do? And he said, what we'll do, you've got an unusually long church, the chancel at the choir end is disproportionately longer than the nave because of the royal tombs. They're in a royal chapel, great big royal chapel. The best thing to do is chop 100 feet off the end of the church, build an end wall. They built a straight wall without chapels across, and demolish the 100 feet and use the material from the demolition to finish the church, the west end, which needed doing, which they did. Then that area became open, and that became the monastic cemetery, which explains why the graves are cutting through, not masonry, but round chalk foundations. Anyway, quite a job trying to excavate skeletons in the snow. I mean, it's one thing doing steady digging, but you try excavating your hands and knees for 6 hours in the snow, it's not funny. And anyway, I was at the West End one day, and the police turned up. I'd met them before, of course, you know. Said, don't wake me up at 3 o'clock in the morning. It was an inspector and a sergeant, and all nice spanking new uniforms, lovely black shiny shoes, you see. They said, have you found any human remains? Because so you have to notify us. So, well, I'm not quite sure. I tell you what, why don't you go and look? Of course, it's knee deep in mud. Really knee deep, and the machinery going around, you know, it really was thick mud. Anyway, got about a third of the way and they gave up. They never reached the cemetery. See, acres and acres of mud, all filled with rain, you know, puddles filled with rain. They weren't going to go near that. So they cleared off. So yeah, it worked out pretty well. It got the royal vault, it got the whole of the plan of the church, got the whole plan of the cloistral, we got the lot. That was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And old Riggold turned up on the last day, couldn't believe it. He said, this usually takes 12 years. You've done it in 8 weeks. You didn't tell me about it. So they were quite pleased. Anyway, I said, you do realise that next week, this lot, we found several sections of the original floor, by the way, tiled floor in the north floor, particularly very nice decorated tile. They've been repaired heavily. And as you'll see from the exhibition here, lots and lots of fragments and large lumps of decorated tiles, including a group of original tiles with an incised design there from Tyler Hill, which is practically unique. Most of them are impressed and stamped, but that early lot, somebody's actually got a sharp chisel, made patterns, and then infilled it with a white slip and fired them. Incised patterns, very interesting, including creating great big rosettes. And really, they're the earliest tiles, medieval tiles in the country, really.
And you think some of them by our high altar at St Catherine's are those, don't you?
It's possible, yeah.
Yeah. And the Victorian tiles replicate the design.
That's good. That's good. They're certainly quite rare. With all the tilery at the Tyler Hill is well known. And I think somebody, by chance, as a farm up there, turned up some tiles at one place. We did some of the tile kilns, the later ones, 13th, 14th century later. But some of them with the incised design turned up at a farm near there, which is the likely kiln site, never excavated. So anyway, we were delighted. Anyway, of course, I said to Riggold, well, this lot's going to go, what are you going to do about it? He said, well, we can't do anything. So I said, well, you can't, we can. Anyway, before that, there's another little incident which I ought to mention. I used to, once I stayed for a few nights at the pub here, and then I went in the King's Arms in Abbey Street. Is that still there? That's gone. Anyway, that bed and breakfast in the King's Arms. Anyway, time we'd finished digging, time we'd processed the finds, I sat every evening doing all the written notes of everything, and finished about 10:30, and then used to go up Abbey Street to the King's Arms and try and get to bed by 11 o'clock. Well, one night, it had been snowing lightly most of the day, and I went out of number 79 into the middle of Abbey Street. Now there's no traffic, whatever, nobody about, whatever. And I walk up the middle of the road, and everything was completely covered with about that much snow. And the lampposts, it looked like a Christmas card. Fantastic, you know, all the lampposts are covered in snow, the timber frame buildings and the rest of it. So I had my rucksack on, so you wear a rucksack, you can put your thumbs under it like this, take the load off your back. I walk up the middle of the road, and say it's still slightly snowing, very light, nobody there, whatever, just me. Walked up the middle, no car tracks, and no vehicles had gone down there at all. Walked up the middle of the road, and I suddenly noticed on my right some footprints, and they'd crossed in front of me. So I stepped over them. Blimey. It's a child footprint with all, you could see all the toes. And I stepped over it, walked on it, turned around and went back and had a look. Oh, that's a bit funny. It's nearly midnight. What's a child with no shoes on, out at that time of the night, coming from this side, crossing the Abbey Street like this and going off just before Arden's house? Oh, that's a bit of a funny do. Daren't tell that lot. They'll all go home. So, that's a bit funny. Anyway, carried on. So anyway, we'd reached the last day, and the old the contractor turned up with a bulldog, an 8, DC8, whacking great 8-foot blade on the front, and started taking out these apple trees. This whacking great blade, and so I knew what they were going to happen. Of course, not only were all our trenches open, but you've got to remember we'd moved 4,000 tonnes of soil, and that was in big heaps all over the site, which was a bit of a blessing. So I said to the driver, well, you better keep away from our site, we haven't finished. Anyway, I was very friendly with the Johnsons. You remember the Johnsons here?
Yeah.
And Arnott Johnson had that warehouse down off West Street there, J.J. Johnson's wholesalers there, and good friends of ours, Arnott and Rosalind, and they lived at the vicarage at all. And their family worked with us actually, the youngsters. And I said to Arnott, look, we've got to stop this. So he said, I know a farmer. I said, well, what's he got? He said, he's got some chestnut fence. I said, we need 500 feet. He went and got 500 feet of chestnut fence. I put it round the site, you see. He said, we've used this tactic, by the way, quite a few times on sites, and fenced it off. So the LKCC pods turned up and said, oi, what's this? I said, look, we found this rare church, important church, and the Ministry of Works is involved, and this is a national monument, and you'll have to go and build your whatever you're doing somewhere else. You're not coming in here. And we fenced it off, giving the impression that it was all done officially, and we've done that before. Anyway, and it obviously worked, and obviously the ministry, they all got a bit excited, and they must have negotiated with the KCC or something, because we stopped it completely, which was good news. Anyway, so the Rico said, well, what do you do next? So I said, we've got to fill it in, we can't leave it open, the frost will get this lot, be destroyed. So he said, oh, how'd you do that? I said, my machines have gone. So I had a private word with the driver from the D8. I said, I'll give you, want to earn 10 quid, which is quite a lot then now, you know. So he said, okay. He said, you've got a spare day. So I said, right, fill this lot in. And he did. He lifted the fence and he levelled the whole thing off completely. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So we were very pleased with that. And 55 days non-stop. Yeah, it snowed. The second to last day, we were working. Winston Churchill had it died during the dig, not because of the dig. And one of our lads was from the Honourable Artillery Company, was on at the funeral, in the parade, John Hall. And it so happened that about that was probably late January, the second to last day of the dig, he and I were digging together at the far eastern end doing the last job, and it snowed like anything. And the snow, I don't know why, but where I live the snow comes like that, but over here the snow comes like that from that marsh. And God, I say our feet went numb, got up to about our waists. I said to John, do you want to stop? And he said no, so we had to carry on. The good news was the next day the sun came out, and I managed to get that final photograph of the whole site, which is the one that's been a lot, did the whole thing, which was brilliant. So we were delighted with that, and I managed to had one or two other little trips which I won't mention. Now, during the course of this, the water board were digging a whacking great pumping station behind Hussard, you know, training ship Hussard down there, and on the edge of the creek. It was 100 feet from the creek. So the engineer there came in one day and said, I found this pot. I said, where was that? He said, 12 feet. And they machined out to about 12 feet. The rest of it they dug by hand. And they went, there's 4 workmen there, and we joined them for a bit of the time. And we got down to even deeper. It's all thick mud. Obviously it had been a creek, without any doubt at all. This is very important. And we got down to about 15 feet, and there was a layer of medieval pottery. Lovely medieval, decorated medieval pottery. Somebody chucking it over from the quay onto the ship. And in here we were down 23 feet. Right? And that was nearly all silt, the whole lot. The creek there was at least 100 feet wide. And Hussard, we didn't get the edge, but the Hussard probably sits over the silted creek. And this is important because some work you're doing at the Brents at the moment, the other side, is at a high level. What we want is we want the other bank, the west bank of the creek. But whereas if you nominally accept the creek to be 100 feet wide, and full of liquid mud obviously, you can now add 100 feet at least on the east side. My guess is that right up to the houses on the Brents, they're sitting virtually on the other bank, though they're obviously much later. If you take that into account, that creek is now 300 feet wide, and there's a great depth of water in it. And of course, what's happened, we've worked at Sandwich and Small Highs and others, since Roman times, the landmass has gone down and is still going down. That's the post-Roman submersion, gone down at least 6 feet. And the effect of that is that the tide pushes up all the creeks and all the rivers, and the silt doesn't reach the channel. The silt is deposited. That's why the creek's full of silt. That's why the Medway's locked. That's why Small Hythe was 600 feet wide. It's 20 feet wide now. And that's all rapid. It's rapid silt. It's forming at the same time. Now, if you put a cup of water there at high tide in the Stour, you probably find there's quite a lot of silt in it. So yeah, that's very important. And that being the case, you can understand why the king chose the creek as a major waterway. It's a major waterway in the 12th century, silty. And I don't know what happens now, but when we were here, you could get a 100-foot ship coming down there, and it had to turn round. Does this happen now? And what it used to do is to ram the bow into the bank and let the current take the stern round like that, and then free itself and then go back up the creek. Does that happen now or not?
There's a turning circle
That's silting
for the
up.
barges, but that's silting up as
silting
well,
up like that.
because they're not
Yeah.
able to dredge it, and they're not able to do the agitation.
Yeah, it's a
Because it
big
costs money.
job.
Yeah.
Yeah, huge job. But there's super silt in there. If you could dump that silt on the farmland, you'd grow bananas there. So anyway, that all worked out very well. And also at the same time, a gas pipe trench was dug at Sindel Bottom, and we went in there and we picked up traces of the lost town of Duraleven, which was ribbon development right along there. And if you think of Tenham at the moment, forget Tenham Station. tenement is just simply those shops each side of the main road. I mean, some houses at the back, but that's exactly what Duraleven was, running up Sindel to Judd's Hill at the top. Right, so the next job, of course, having done all that, was we held an exhibition here. Forgotten where it was.
Oh, but the one that Princess Alexandra came to, that was 68.
No, this was straight away after
Oh,
the end
sorry.
of the dig. Yeah, it was somewhere here. Oh, was it in the council chamber?
Yeah,
Probably.
yeah,
We brought in, I managed to get somewhere,
yeah.
like in great glass cases, big as that table. We got them in on a lorry and held an exhibition. And yeah, it was very well received. Yeah. Anyway, the next job, of course, is to write the report. Well, in those days, nobody wrote reports because it was a huge job, and nobody paid for it at all. So reports never got written. So a great many excavations, pre-war and post-war, never were completed, and that went on for a long time after the war. Anyway, I felt under an obligation to write it all up, and I spent the next 3 years writing it up in my spare time, during which time I had to do 18 other rescue excavations. So, and I visited, I think, 20 of the great churches of the realm: Lincoln, York. I didn't get to Durham. Some of the West Country churches, or Salisbury particularly, Winchester. I actually visited and measured the naves to get the spacing of the aisle to the nave and the eastern arm. I think I did a dozen at least. Did certainly Rochester and Canterbury. Didn't do St Paul's for obvious reasons. And at the end of 3 years, I managed to actually finish the report. And that's the first of 12 major reports that my team have produced, major monographs in the Kent series. And how do you actually lay it out and design it? Well, you probably heard of Sir Mortimer Wheeler, hopefully. He's the leading international archaeologist. He was working before the war on big sites, universities and the rest, and published. He was the man that did publish. And his slogan was, a site unpublished is a site destroyed. If you dig a site and don't publish it, nobody can dig it twice. The records disappear. So I thought, well, he's published something. So I got hold of his Stanix report. That's at the Hillfort in Yorkshire. I'll model Faversham Abbey on that. And I did. And Oxford University Press printed it. I asked them for a price, they were too dear. So I've got another company to actually do it. But I modelled it on his book. Okay? I thought, well, that can't be wrong, can it, if you model it on the world's leading archaeologist? So that's what happened. Anyway, there's another bit of a story. We finished the dig on the 23rd of February, like snow and ice, and carried on processing the finds and other things. And I was working at Recolver in June, in the sunshine, and the publican from the King Ethelbert, right, that's the only pub in England that's had a king named after it, came running up to the site and said that I had a phone call from the government, something's happened at Faversham. They want you to phone up. So I ran back to the pub, and it was our friend Rigold again. He said, oh, we've had a report. The contractors are working across that orchard area, outside the fenced area, and they've hit the foundations of a building, which is obviously an outbuilding of the abbey, because the monastic could have outbuildings, brew houses and other things. If that, can you go and have a look? So I said to the team, well, I've got the Land Rover, I'll nip over there quickly. I got there, and there's a big area being stripped, these grading machines going up and down. Went over, I could see the foundations, flint foundations, so I thought, well, I wonder what this is. So I looked more carefully, had a quick stab, and all of them were associated with Roman tile. It clearly wasn't a monastic building, it was an unknown Roman villa of all things. And they were going to zap it in the next few days again, so here we go again. So I got hold of the contractors and said, look, and got hold of Rigold and said, there's a disaster, another disaster coming up. What are you going to do? What are you going to do about it? And that always gets them on the hop, that does. They're going to be accused of destroying a monument. They're not too keen on that. Bad publicity, don't want any of that. So I said the contractors have agreed to hold off for 10 days. I'm prepared to provide, get the team in from Regola and elsewhere and get some more machinery in. You put up the cash, very modest amounts, and they agreed. So we spent 10 days digging on the villa site, and it was fantastic. You know, very nice, modest Roman villa, half a dozen rooms, veranda, passageway, wings, and there had been a mosaic there crunched up, and a harp of course and everything. And I said to the headmaster of the grammar school, was it Rowe? Reed, that's it, the little chubby chap. He's quite helpful. And I said, look, I need someone from your, you know, it's June, they've probably finished their A levels or whatever. I want someone to help on the dish. I've got just a chap. He said he's dead keen on history. I said, right, send him on. He turned up, he's about 4'9", weedy little bloke, and couldn't lift a shovel. So I said, he might be keen on history. I said, he's not going to do anything on my site. Can't you get the football team? He did, he got the football team.
Well, it was all of us that, well, majority of us, we were given the choice.
Yeah.
Keep coming to school or you can go and dig. So,
About 10 of them did. They were all
and I
fit,
think
strong
we had
lads.
some from the girls' school.
Yeah, that's right. What was it? William Gibbs.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we had a few girls from the sixth formers and some of the lads, and you know, wearing their shorts in the sun. Yeah, and all good strong diggers and all worked well as a team, and you joined in, didn't you?
Yeah, thoroughly enjoyable. Yeah.
That's right. And we finished it in 10 days, completely. And just, I mean, oh look out, there's a problem here. What's that dark stain running underneath the villa? No, quick dig. There's a ditch running underneath the villa and it's got Iron Age pottery in it. Look out, there's a Belgic sign. Phoned old Rigold up, said, oh yeah, there's a problem. We found a Belgic farmstead under there, was predated the villa. What are you going to do about it? I've done this all the time. And so he said, oh, what do I do? I said, right, they've given us another 6 days. I'll finish it in 6 days. So he said, it's okay. So we did. We finished that. And didn't do all of it, but enough. Cut the ditches in different places. Very nice pottery at the bottom of the ditches. Very hard. It's a brick earth site, and it's silted with brick earth, and you cannot see it. But what had happened in late Iron Age times, they'd tipped some rubbish down the side of the ditch, including lots of charcoal, down the side of the ditch, and when it was wet, it showed us a black line, a straight black line, very strange, about that wide. And I realised, of course, it was the layer going down. So that was brilliant. We got the Belgic. Anyway, the school were all quite interested, and then the KCC kept turning up. The chairwoman of the education committee came up, whose name I can't remember, seemed very excited and interested, you know. This was a school, you know, it's meant to have some interest in heritage and culture. And they produced the American ambassador for some reason. And he said, we haven't got anything in Texas like this. He says, I don't understand it. You've got a great big royal abbey, you've got a Roman villa, and you've got a Belgic farmstead, all in one field close together. And you're not doing anything about it. The chances are you can destroy it. So it's unheard of, you know, I haven't got anything in America like that. Anyway, he must have made a few rude remarks to somebody. And they said, right, we'll change the whole thing. And they said, what's going to be? He said, a football pitch. So we'll change that. So there was a bump in. Instead of having a level area for football, it was then like this. Not in the middle of the pitch, but and then on the goal mouth. So anyway, that's what happened. The whole thing was saved. Brilliant. So yeah, we were delighted. Anyway, when we finished the Abbey dig on the last day, it got dark and loaded all the tools up in my vehicle. And I said to the other diggers, right, better go and get something to eat. It's dark, it's 7 o'clock, we've got to get back to the Bromley area. And we came in this little cafe in West Street there and had a meal. Drove back to the site, went round the back of the building, and there's a 30-foot ladder up the back of our building. So I climbed the ladder, and somebody'd been up there rolling up the lead on the corner of the building, about this wide. Oh, I'd got halfway, heard me come back, ran down the ladder and hid in the bushes. So I phoned the police up again. That was the first day of the dig and the last day of the dig. And the Faversham police turned up in a Ford 8. Top speed, 25 miles an hour. Crooks are going around in lorries or in fast cars. You're not going to catch anybody. Anyway, so I reported it to them, so that was quite good.
They probably knew exactly who it was.
Quite likely, yes. Yeah, I think I knew too. Anyway, I managed to get the report finished, and by chance, 3 years later, the grammar school was finished, and there was an opening ceremony, and Princess Alexandra was lined up to do it. And Arnott Johnson was a school governor, and he said, "Oh yes, the old princess is coming." I said, "Well, that's interesting. I've just finished my book, or just going to the printers." So he said, "Well, I tell you what, why don't we give her the first copy?" And so I said, "Well, okay, that's all right." And get it specially bound in blue leather, suitably inscribed in gold lettering and the rest of it, and we'll present it to her. So I said, "That's a good idea." Okay. So the day, within about a fortnight of the event, it was a grand event, remember, and there was a ceremony in the council chamber here, and then at the school, the new school, and the headmaster and I think the head pupil had to speak, and they're absolutely packed and all the rest of it. So I said to Arnott, "Oh, it'd be nice if I could go." He said, "Oh no, no chance of that." I said, "What about Mrs. Roberts? She's your mother-in-law. She worked with us in all that terrible weather. Can't she come?" "Oh no, we can't have that. All the invitations have gone out." And I thought, well, that's a bit thick. So I said, "Well, I tell you what, Arnott, I'm not very happy with that. She cannot have my book." Oh dear, that's a problem. It obviously all been lined up. So he said, "Oh, okay, we go and see the governors. We can get 4 invitations." So got an invitation to go. And Mrs. Roberts went, and a couple of the others. That was good. And we had the ceremony in there, and I had to present Princess Alexandra with the first copy, which she seemed to accept. Well, I've met her once since at the palace. She didn't remember the book, and certainly hadn't read it. And the year before that was rather interesting. Oh, on the event for the school, the police were all at the gate. It's the same lot, and they were checking everybody going in. They had these passes, and the year before we'd been called in to save the gunpowder mills, righto, and it was terrible. They were going to. First of all, they were going to overbuild them with Parham's estate, completely, his nan's estate. And this is where I made good contact with the Faversham Society. This was brilliant, right at the beginning. And Arthur was brilliant. He's the founder really, I think, of the Faversham Society. And it's probably the best civic society in the country. I think I've always said that. And Arthur was the founder. And Jack Salmon did the 2 Salmon brothers, who probably aren't with us anymore, he did a reconstruction of the villa, very good. And Peter Hutley Bull,
Yeah.
he was there as well, lived in Newton Road. He's probably no longer with us, is he?
No.
His wife's still alive.
Really?
Yeah, Angela is.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah,
good.
he and Jack and Arthur all died in the same year.
Really?
2000.
Gosh.
14, sorry.
Anyway, so I had very good contacts with the Faversham Society. I put up some money for this place when it was open, and for the gunpowder mills. And we held a committee meeting. Arthur called a committee meeting to discuss these matters. There was Hutley Bull, Jack Salmon, me, and Arthur. Hutley Bull and I were cracking jokes all the time. Arthur got quite cross. He said, "You stop cracking jokes." The only meeting I ever went to, the Faversham Society. Anyway, the gunpowder mill site was quite good, and Arthur again had been the contact there, and he said, "Well, it's all going to be destroyed." I said, "Well, we'll come in and do a dig first of all, quick dig to see what there is." And I put 2 teams in there for 2 weekends, and the Parham, the developer, had agreed, we thought, and so we cleared the trees and cleared the site. There was the foundations of 4 mill houses there. It was absolutely superb, brilliant. Cleared all the rubbish and debris. Anyway, the seemed to be going quite well, but they got a foreman on the site looking after things, and he turned up and said, "Well, get off the site. You've got no permission to be here." So I said, "Yes, we have. Old Parham's given us permission through the Faversham Society." "No, you haven't. Get off the site. We're not going. We've got permission. This place is going to be destroyed. We're going to stay here. So I'll get the police." Again, yeah. So I put somebody on guard at the main entrance, one of our lads, and he came running up about 1:45. He said, "The police have just arrived. They're coming in." So I nipped round behind a tree and said to all the diggers, "Carry on digging." And the police turned up and said, "Well, who's in charge?" So Sid Harper was my number 2. He said, "Well, Mr. Philp is." He said, "But he's not here at the moment." So, and they had no jurisdiction on private lands, so made no attempt to stop digging. Anyway, the police wouldn't go. It was lunchtime. So I thought, that's a bit odd. And I'd left my cameras in the middle of the site. So I thought, well, they probably don't know who I am. So I walked out to the middle of the site, in front of the police, who were standing next to my camera, picked up my camera and shouted, "I think it's lunchtime, isn't it?" And they all said yes, and we all went off, you see. That was the first weekend. Well, the second weekend, we realised there'd be a similar problem, and we opened up more of the site. It was absolutely terrific. Anyway, the police were up to it this time, because they found a hole in the fence. They bypassed the guard, our guard, and came on the site, and again did the old hiding trick and carried on. And they cleared off in the end, and that was good. We finished, and they must have made a note. They must have made a note, because when they had that opening ceremony, Princess Alexandra there, they were at the gate. They recognised me as I came in. They said, "You're not coming in." "We know who you are. You're not coming in." So I said, "Oh yes, I am. Here's my ticket." They were quite good humoured. So probably it's listed in the annals of the police. So yes, that all worked out very well. And what else happened? Oh, now then. So what about the gunpowder mill site? What's going to happen to those? Parham's going to destroy it. So I said, "Look," to Arthur, "let's call a meeting on the site. Get up on the Parham, the developer. I'll get hold of Rigold from the ministry and for the government. You can be the Faversham Society. He drags in the mayor. I'll be the archaeological team. We'll have a site meeting on the site, decide what to do." And okay, 11 o'clock for the meeting. So I left at 7 o'clock at home, got down here at 9 o'clock, went to the site, climbed a tree where the gunpowder was, and put up this notice which I'd done the night before. This site is something like, to destroy it is a crime or is a criminal offence or something like that. And what you don't know is I put some initials on the bottom. My initials are BJP, but I thought I put Arthur's initials on it, AJP.
Thanks, Ron.
I don't know if you really must have realised. So we all stood around at the bottom looking at this notice which they couldn't reach, and it obviously intimidated the meeting. And I thought, well, old Rigold's there, he'll do his stuff, won't he? But you can't rely on them, they're not in the same world as us. So I had this meeting, and Parham turned up, and he turned up with his foreman, who was about 6'4", great big bloke like this, his foreman. I thought, this could be trouble. So we stood there and argued back to the mayor was there, whoever that was. Eames, does that make a name mean anything? Anyway, he was there, and 2 or 3 others. Ely, yeah, Gordon Ely, yeah. And a few others from the Faversham Society. Quite a jolly meeting. And old Rigold there, he always smoked this pipe, and he used to, when it went out, and he was in the middle of a talk, he'd stuff it full of matches, take 5 minutes to it, he'd stop the discussions completely, turn the pipe upside down and try and light it. try and light these matches in his pocket. And he stopped the meeting for 10 or 15 minutes while he fumbled like that. Oh, this is helpful. So in the end I said to Parham, look, every site's worth something. How much is this site worth? And he said, 7. And this silly arse Riggold said, are we talking hundreds or thousands? He might have said millions for all I knew. So he said, you won't believe this, 750. That was 3 house plots. Beat that. Each house plot was only worth 250. What are they worth today? 70 grand. So I shook his hand, said straight away, right, we'll buy it. I said to Arthur, right, you raise the money.
Raise the money.
And I gave him 10 quid, it was my last 10 quid, last 10 quid, and they did. And the whole thing was saved. When we finished the dig, for some, the town knew that we'd found a monastic cemetery, and somebody was walking down that lane at night and identified 3 ghostly figures as moving across the orchard, and that really started it. And the place for the next 3 weeks, there were crowds of people. It was in the Kent Messenger and other places, crowds at night down there. And then the caretaker of a local school, a secondary school somewhere down here, he said, yeah, I've known that for years. He said, I've been seeing stuff there for years.
The old boy.
Yeah, and so we didn't have any money, but it was in the paper, and it caused quite a stir.